Hi, I'm Jack Neely, and welcome to the very first Realm Linux training screencast. Today we're going to talk about installing a Realm Linux machine with Web-Kickstart. First things first, we need to identify the host we want to install. The host we're going to install is kvmguest02.unity.ncsu.edu. This is one of my test VMs. We need to check and make sure that this host is in DNS correctly to be installed. So we bring up Proteus and let's search for this machine. Alright, our search has returned two objects, the host object and the IP object. Let's start with the host object. This host is already in DNS and is associated with the IP address that we want to use. So let's check out that IP address object. This IP address is set as DHCP reserved and has a MAC address associated with it. That enables DHCP to work. We also want to check out the MAC pool status of this IP address. So we edit, and this is the same screen you see when you originally set up this IP address. You give it a host name, the MAC address you want to associate with it, and you assign it to a MAC pool. In this case, Pixie All is already in the default for this drop-down box, so we know that's the current setting of this IP. If it's not, you click the button, find Pixie All, and then hit the update button. But this is already in DNS, so we're set to go. Now let's check to make sure those DNS changes are effective. So we attempt to resolve kvmguest02, and it comes back to the IP address that we want to use. We also want to check to make sure it reverse resolves. And it reverse resolves, and we get the same fully quantified domain name, FQDN, as we started with. If the IP address doesn't reverse resolve properly, the install won't work. So we've got that set up. Now we're assuming that you've been given access to a Realm Linux department in the past or just very recently, and its Web-Kickstart directory. Realm Linux departments are a way to delineate groups of machines from each other. So OIT has its machines, which are managed by different people than the College of Engineering's machines. So for this video's sake, we are going to be assigned the test department. So we go to where the Web-Kickstart configs are stored, and they live in AFS BP system config Linux Kickstart /configs. And you can see there's a bunch of directories for each department here. So let's finally get into the test directory. This test directory is set up exactly like I would set up a new Web-Kickstart directory for a new department. It has an example, and it has a use directory which contains a departmental include file. That departmental include file has some encryption keys used to set up each host, and they usually stay the same for each host in the department. So rather than copying and pasting them to each config, we use a use or include file. Okay, let's go ahead and look at that example now. This is a simple example that sets up the very basics for a simple Realm Linux server. The version keyword here is required, and it states the exact version of the OS we're going to install. In this case, Red Hat Enterprise Linux Server version 6 with the x86-64 architecture. You can find all the version keys on the Web-Kickstart webpage. Our second line is our use file that includes our departmental includes, and this is the path to that include file. The package keyword defines the group of packages that we wish to install. We're doing a simple server. Realm Linux server is the simplest stripped down bare metal sort of server. We don't usually run X on servers, hence the skipx command. And finally, you can include any number of post install scripts after a %post key. We have just a simple echo post running into a file in root's home directory. This script runs after the install is complete and before the machine reboots for the first time. So let's look at that departmental use file. I'm going to look at the template so I don't reveal any encryption keys to the public. But this template is exactly the same as the departmental include file with some fake numbers here. So up here at the top we have some stuff about bconfig. If you already have a Web-Kickstart directory or used one in the past, you might be set up to use bconfig as our configuration management tool. That's the old and is being replaced with Puppet. So to make sure you're using Puppet as the default configuration management system, make sure that Puppet is in your departmental include file. Enable activation key. This is the key that associates your machine with our RHN satellite and allows it to register with the satellite and get the appropriate updates. You always want to make sure your department is set and is set correctly. We're working in the test department. Our department is set for test. This next command sets up automated root passwords. We have a system in AFS that stores root passwords and can deploy them to all of the machines in your department, and can change them on all of the machines in your department in an automated fashion. You might be using this, or you might be using more localized passwords. This system is available for anyone on campus to use. Root is our keyword here. The department or group for the root password in question is next, followed by an encryption key. The list of systems administrators for a department works in a very similar way. Usage is the key. There's the department or group name for the systems administrator list we want to pull, and the matching encryption key. Again, this lets us automatically handle the systems administrators on each machine, remove and add them as necessary, completely automated. The owner key sets up an alias for where root's email should go. You should create a mailing list for your department or some sort of alias that can collect these. Worst comes to worst, assign it to a NCSU, a Unity ID at ncsu.edu. That only goes to one person, but at least you'll get that email. Remedy is usually not suggested for this particular use because it doesn't really like getting emails from root. It thinks those are spam. So I would suggest to set up a mailing list for this purpose. If there's a problem with the Realm Linux machine, it will try to email this email address to let you know. We always disable SE Linux by default, and we've stated that to be explicit here. The following two keys here set up local and remote clusters. Clusters are sort of an advanced topic, so we're going to explicitly turn them off here. Back to KVM Guest 02. We're going to copy our example to KVM Guest 02.unity.ncsu.edu. The name of the Web-Kickstart config file must match the fully quantified domain name of the machine you're installing. So, let's test. Does that name resolve in DNS? It does. It gives us our IP address. Next, we can do some advanced testing on our Web-Kickstart. So let's go back up here to the Realm Linux management tools at secure.linux.ncsu.edu/rml-tools. Click on Web-Kickstart Tools. And type in our fully quantified domain name here at the IP or host name box. Hit submit. This will generate the kickstart that will actually be sent to the machine to install it. And there it is. It is a little long and complex, but if you see this kickstart, you know the system is working and everything's in order. If there's an error, it'll display an error message and give you a hint about what to do. So at this point, we're ready to install our first machine. I'm using KVM virtual machines for this demonstration. So to install that machine, I'm going to set it up with a proper name, have it accelerate. I've got its network configuration set, where its virtual image lives, but importantly, I've got the MAC address that matches the information in Proteus. So this little VM will start up and it will attempt to pixie boot as I've instructed it to do. If you're installing a bare metal machine, usually hitting that F12 button during boot will cause it to pixie boot. Once it's pixie booted, this is what you should see. You see the OIT logo and the Pixie Bootloader installer. Big warning about erasing your hard drive. This is where you want to be. At the boot prompt, type in that version string that you used in your Web-Kickstart config. Server 6.x8664. This boots into the install media that's got to match your Web-Kickstart configuration. This downloads stuff from the TFTP server. This downloads a lot of stuff. And finally starts the installation procedure. At this point, if the install pops up a blue screen and asks you what language you want to proceed with, you know there's a problem somewhere. The Web-Kickstart installation mechanism is completely automated, so if you've gotten that question, something's gone wrong with the Web-Kickstart generation. You might want to go back to the Web-Kickstart tools and see if your Web-Kickstart generates properly. And we move into graphical mode. It sets up our partitioning system. Notice that we didn't have to specify our partitioning system in our Web-Kickstart config. It's going to use a default. Once we get here, the install will flip back to text mode, run some updates, and run configuration, and finally, your PostScripts. Next, Yum, the auto updater, will bring our system up to date. Here, Puppet, our configuration management tool, will lay down all of the configuration that makes Realm Linux into Realm Linux. At this point, the install is almost finished, and the machine will reboot shortly. Alright, the machine's rebooting. It's booting the newest kernel. And I'm going to hit the escape button so we can actually see the boot up process, rather than the nice little scrolly bar. KDump is rebuilt on boot. This is our first boot, so it's got to be rebuilt. on future reboots, that won't show as a warning. And this run of Puppet will correct the sendmail error that showed up on the screen here. Okay, our machine is now booted. Let's log in. I've used a test account here, but this test account is in the list of system administrators for this department. So my Unity user ID and password work. I can get to my AFS space. Everything looks in order. Again, because my user ID is in the list of systems administrators, I can become root. That's my own password for the Sorcerer account. And there's the root prompt. That's it for this Realm Linux screencast. Thanks for watching.